Seattle, I get it. They're not the greatest uniforms. I'm not going to go out on a limb for the lime greens, but I appreciate the creativity because in the NFL, you don't really get a ton of that. I think the NBA maybe has gone too far in terms of creativity. Looking at you, Miami Heat. College football, can get a little zany at times, but Seattle's kind of the only team in the league that has, to use the W word, a wacky uniform combination like that. So in a league that's usually very buttoned up and very strict about its uniforms, I don't mind Seattle taking a little bit of a risk there.
Hey everyone, welcome into Monkey Knife Fight Live. It's the Week 15 Sunday NFL preview show. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me, Nick Whalen of Rotowire.com. Nick, Thursday night football this week starts off with a bang. The 49ers win their seventh straight game. They win the NFC West in the process. Third win with Brock Purdy at the helm. Is it time to ask the question, is this still Jimmy Garoppolo's job when he comes back, if and when?
Well, I think that was going to be a question no matter what, right? Because technically Jimmy Garoppolo is not even the starting quarterback for this team. So, yeah, it went from, I think, already somewhat of a sketchy situation as to whether Garoppolo is even on this roster next year. Of course, we still have Trey Lance. And now it's like you might have to decide between bringing Garoppolo back on what would likely be another short-term deal, rolling with Brock Purdy, or rolling with the guy you took number 2 overall and spent significant draft capital on just a couple of years ago. So obviously the 49ers are focused on the present at this point, but that is going to be a fascinating situation as far as how that plays out, because depending on what happens here over the next month and into the playoffs, I mean, there's a chance that Brock Purdy could emerge as like the most valuable quarterback on that roster. So in some ways, it's going to be a really difficult decision, I think, as far as what they do going forward. But, maybe you could trade Brock Purdy. Maybe you could trade Trey Lance if you want to go in that direction. I don't think that Jimmy G is the quarterback of this team next year either way, though. I think this whole situation is so unique with the timing of Trey Lance's injury. I think there's a better chance that we see Garoppolo brought in as kind of the veteran savior for a team like the Jets.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, I think this Brock Purdy situation has made it clear that they're going to go forward probably with Purdy and Lance next year in 2023. But when it comes to this season, I think as of right now, as we head into the weekend of Week 15, it's still Jimmy G's job if and when he comes back in like the divisional round. But if Purdy keeps stringing wins together, I don't know how you're going to be able to take the ball out of his hands, because they are playing very well right now. And hey, George Kittle, good to see you. If you have him on your fantasy teams to start the playoffs, 93 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game Thursday night.
And I mean, the first one was just incredible play design by Kyle Shanahan and well executed by the Niners offense. I mean, kind of the dual fake to each side, like a swing pass, and then Kittle leaks out wide open over the middle. That was one of the better design plays you're going to see all year. And then the second one, second play and a half, I think it was just a long 54-yarder. And that was the type of play that we haven't really seen from George Kittle all that much over the last year or two. I mean, early in his career, it felt like he had one of those per game where he's just rumbling down, throwing defenders off. So that's a great sign for the 49ers. I mean, McCaffrey looked fantastic. But for a team that won't have Deebo Samuel, likely for the rest of the regular season, they're going to need those guys to step up. But either way, I think if you're the Niners and someone told you you'd be on your third quarterback, you'd be without Deebo Samuel, you would have had crazy injuries all over the defense in the middle part of the year, and you still lock up the division with 3 weeks left. It's been an impressive year.
Yeah, absolutely. And they still could get the 2 seed, and they still could even technically get the 1 seed if the Eagles slip up here down the stretch. We'll see if that happens. But big takeaway from last night, though, man, those 49er jerseys are nice. The white on white, the red letters, the gold helmet. Those might be my favorite jerseys in the entire league. And then you contrast that with whatever the hell it was that Seattle was wearing with the lime green and the blue pants. And it's just, I don't know, those Niners jerseys pop, man. I love them.
Yeah. Can't echo that enough. It's very subtle, uniform connoisseurs like you and I pick up on these things. I mean, to the naked eye, they might just look like a kind of white on white version of the normal 49ers road unis, but that is not the case. I mean, it's the black outlining on the letters, a little bit of black toning on like the stripe on the pants. I mean, those are ridiculously clean. And it's a shame that Deebo didn't play last night, because I feel like he looks like the coolest player in the NFL when they wear those jerseys. He's just untackleable in those uniforms. Seattle, I get it. They're not the greatest uniforms. I'm not going to go out on a limb for the lime greens, but I appreciate the creativity, because in the NFL, you don't really get a ton of that. I think the NBA maybe has gone too far in terms of creativity. Looking at you, Miami Heat, college football, could get a little zany at times, but Seattle's kind of the only team in the league that has, to use the W word, a wacky uniform combination like that. So in a league that's usually very buttoned up and very strict about its uniforms, I don't mind Seattle taking a little bit of a risk there. By the way, next season, Seahawks are bringing back the Steve Largent era uniform. So we're not talking like those weird, dull teal Sean Alexander. No, we're going a generation back to like the light blue, or I guess the royal blue and green look, which was
right with the gray helmet, the silver kind of helmet. Yep. Love those.
I think that was one that at the time, we were small children at that point. I don't remember thinking those were cool, but as time has gone on, those have become very cool.
Yeah, they're going back to the AFC West Seahawk era, I think. Like, the 90s.
Good days.
Yeah, absolutely. All right,
Ricky Waters era.
Yep, Ricky Waters. Yep, very good. Another former Niner too. Moving on, there's been quite a bit of Jalen Hurts hate this week. I mean, obviously you got Chris Sims saying that even if they had Gardner Minshew in there, they'd still be pretty damn good. And then we have Micah Parsons, who goes on the Von cast with Von Miller recently. Great name for a podcast, by the way, Von. Good for you. And he says, quote, when you look at the Eagles, is it Jalen Hurts or the team? Miller tries to respond, and Parsons goes, no, it's system and a team. He later backtracks a little bit and says, no, I was trying to credit the Eagles defense and not slate Jalen Hurts. But, Nick, I got to ask you, though, with the Cowboys not playing the Eagles until next week on Christmas Eve, are they overlooking the Jacksonville Jaguars this Sunday?
I sure hope they are, because if the Jaguars win this game somehow, it's going to get real dicey for the old Tennessee Titans in the AFC South, because that lead, I mean, they would have been like, I don't even know, minus like 100,000 to win the division a month ago, and all of a sudden their lead is down to 2, and they play the Jags again in Week 18, and Jacksonville has a game left against Houston as well. So the pressure is suddenly on Tennessee to get this thing turned around, and Jacksonville, they're kind of playing with house money. If they find a way to really make this a competition for the division, that's a huge win. But this season, in some ways, has already been a success for Jacksonville, especially with Trevor Lawrence playing the way that he has for the last 5 or 6 games. So, I actually deep down think that number's a little low. Cowboys -4 on the road. It should probably be closer to 5 or 6. I think maybe that's a little bit of an overreaction to what happened against Houston last week. My fear, as somebody who wants the Jags to win this game, is that Dallas had its letdown last week, and they survived, to their credit, and they probably don't let that type of game happen again.
Yeah, I would think that. Who's Kansas City playing this week too?
The Houston Texans.
There you go. Yeah, well, there you go. I don't think Houston's going to pull that off 2 weeks in a row. They are getting like 14
absolutely not
points in that one. Yeah,
they're in trouble.
The Chiefs, they went up 27-0 and then let Denver walk right back into that one. So Broncos country, let's ride. Anyways, and moving on, Nick, we got 4 weeks left to go for most of these teams here outside of Seattle and San Francisco. Playoff spots, they're kind of slowly getting smaller and smaller with what teams are going to be able to get to those spots. Let's start with the AFC. 3 teams, the Patriots, the Chargers, and the Jets, seemingly fighting for that final playoff spot and the right to probably get crushed by Buffalo or Kansas City on Wild Card Weekend. I'll give you the schedules here. The Pats are at Vegas, home Cincinnati, home Miami, at Buffalo. Chargers have Tennessee at home. Then they go on the road to face the Colts, have the Rams, and at Denver. And the Jets have the Lions, Jacksonville on a Thursday night, at Seattle, at Miami to end. Who do you see getting that final playoff spot?
To me, it's probably the Chargers. I think you want to be wary of not buying too much back in on the Chargers after one impressive win over Miami, and in which they only scored 23 points. I mean, it kind of felt like the Chargers and Justin Herbert dominated that game, and yet it really wasn't all that dominant of a result. But I still think they're a better team than New England. They're a better team than the Jets. The Jets are starting Zach Wilson this weekend against Detroit. That suddenly becomes an extremely dicey game. We'll see how much the line moves there. They could end up being home dogs to the Detroit Lions in that game.
Already won. The Lions are already 1-point favorites.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, it swung a little bit already. That's not surprising. So if they lose that game, they'll obviously be in trouble. And you read off the schedules. I think Chargers Titans this week is a fascinating game. These are 2 teams that very much need this game. 2 extremely different teams, but I think the Chargers will be able to throw the ball all over Tennessee. And I think Tennessee is going to be able to run the ball all over the Chargers. So, when you think of a shootout, I think you're thinking of two teams throwing the ball all over the place, Kansas City, Buffalo type of game. I think this could be a really unique shootout where, one team is piling up yards on the ground, the other team is piling up yards through the air, and we end up getting a lot of points. Beyond that, though, Colts, Rams, Broncos, that's about as good of a finish as you could ask for schedule-wise. So if the Chargers could beat the Titans at home this week, I think they'll be in really good shape.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Patriots are going to back into this playoff spot just because I can't trust the Chargers. They're still the Chargers. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is, whether it's Phillip Rivers or Justin Herbert, they are the same team. I can't trust them. Anytime you think with the Chargers that things are going well, somehow they just screw it all up. And I could see them very easily screwing it up against Tennessee this week and giving New England a cushion if the Patriots can pull off a win in Vegas against the Raiders. And yeah, the Jets are still the Jets too. I can't take them seriously. And sneaky also, watch out for this. Maybe the Dolphins fall right off and fall out of the playoffs.
It's possible.
It's very possible. We talked about this on the Saturday preview show that things are just not going well for Miami right now. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Dolphins that last Sunday of the regular season are playing for their playoff lives. On the NFC, other side, 4 teams fighting for 2 spots. We got the Commanders and the Giants. They'll go at it this weekend. Seattle, who played Thursday night and lost. And then Dan Campbell's Detroit Lions are very much in the playoff picture right now at 6-7, going for that final spot. Schedules for you, Nick. Washington has the Giants this weekend. Then they go at San Francisco, and they finish up at home with Cleveland and Dallas. The Giants are at Washington, at Minnesota, home against the Colts, and then at Philly, so 3 of 4 on the road. Seattle, they started this week with a loss. They go at Kansas City next week, and then they have the Jets and the Rams at home to finish. And the Jets have at the Rams, at Carolina, home Chicago, home Green Bay. I like the way that schedule's shaping up for the Lions.
Yeah, it's hard not to. And, this game against the Jets, like we said, suddenly feels like it's even more winnable. It was probably already close to a 50-50, although I did like the Jets at home with Mike White. I kind of need to see Jared Goff play well in an adverse environment outdoors. So we'll see. I mean, that game is by no means a lock for the Detroit Lions. You didn't mention the Packers, then they're still hanging around.
Somehow.
They get the Lions. They are. And they get the Rams this week. They should win that game. If they win at Miami on Christmas Day, I'm telling you, this is going to get really, really wild because I think they'll sniff it at that point, and I think they're going to beat the Vikings in Week 17, and we could have a Packers-Lions showdown for the final wild card spot in Week 18. Like it really does feel like all the things that Green Bay has needed, other than Detroit, I guess, losing games, like Seattle completely falling off has been huge for the Green Bay Packers. And, one of the Commanders and the Giants is taking a loss this week. And
maybe they did tie already.
Well, yeah, if they have 2 ties, I mean, that's just, maybe that would be best for them. I don't know if they're trying to collude and both make the playoffs, but they kind of need whichever team loses that game this week to keep losing. Very possible given the schedules that you read off. I mean, Seattle, I think plays like the Chiefs next week. So, at Kansas City, they'll lose that game. All of a sudden they're kind of out of it. I mean, Carolina still very much alive. Atlanta still very much alive. They're 5-8 as well. But it does feel like to kind of bring this around, it feels like the Lions are the team that has all the momentum right now. Like I think everybody would rather see Detroit than the Giants or the Commanders in one of those wild card spots, right? I mean, Absolutely. Not that those teams haven't earned it, but in terms of teams that are playing well, I mean, there's like close to an airtight case. I feel like that the Lions are the 4th best team in the NFC over the last month and a half.
Yeah, no, they're playing very well outside of that loss to Buffalo. I don't think they've lost besides that. They've no. I mean, they crushed your Jaguars, which is the real test there. So
yeah, the refs, it was classic ref game.
Absolutely. All right, moving on. Let's talk about some of these contests we got here on MKF this week. We'll start off in the 1:00 window. Let's head down to our 10x10 here, and we'll do this slate. Mike White is on this contest right now, guys. He obviously is not going to play, so hold off on picking the less on Mike White because it's just going to invalidate your contest here. You don't want to hit every other prop and then have Mike White invalidate it for you. I've had that happen in the past with quarterbacks in these matchups. So let's start with Patrick Mahomes, 290.5. They're at Houston. He's hit this number in 9 of 13 games this season, Nick, in 8 of the last 9. It seems like an automatic, but is Kansas City going to be up so big that Mahomes might not get to this number?
Yeah, it's very possible. I'm kind of the belief that Houston had its chance to kind of pull off the big feel-good win of the season and squandered it last week. I don't think they have any chance to control the clock, control possession in the way that they did last week against Dallas. No Dameon Pierce for the Houston Texans. That's going to be huge. So, yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that, Kansas City jumps out to a big lead and we see a lot of Pacheco in the second half. Although we saw that last week, and all of a sudden, a 27-7 game becomes a one-score game in the blink of an eye. And Patrick Mahomes ends up having to kind of sling the ball around it to keep Kansas City to keep pace with Denver. So he ended up with 352 yards last week. It didn't really look like that was going to be the case early in the game. I'm going to go more here. I think this Houston defense is better than we give it credit for. I think they can at least be combative for a quarter. I do think Kansas City ends up winning this game pretty handedly, but I think Houston, for as bad as they are, I mean, they're going to end up with probably a 1-win record. The point differential historically bad. I get all that, but they at least put up a fight in most of these games. So I'll go more on 290.5. I think they'll force Mahomes to actually do some things.
All right, moving on. CeeDee Lamb, the Cowboys are at the Jaguars, 75.5 receiving yards for CeeDee. He's reached 76 in 5 of 13 games, but he also has another 3 games with at least 70. So he does flirt with this number quite a bit.
Yeah.
Jacksonville ranks 29th against the pass, and they have been prone to giving up big days to wide receivers, especially elite ones like CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, they kind of got off the hook last week because Tennessee just doesn't really throw the ball to receivers or have any capable receivers. So I think that was a big part of the reason that the Jags defense looked better. Obviously, forcing 4 turnovers was huge as well. But yeah, this has not been a good secondary. You said it. I mean, they're a bottom 5 secondary. It's gotten worse and worse as the year's gone along. They were actually a pretty solid defense early on. But I think this is a great spot for CeeDee Lamb. That's really what worries me about this matchup most is the Cowboys offense against the Jags defense. I think the Jags can move the ball on Dallas, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to get stops. And when you're talking about the Dallas passing game, it begins with CeeDee Lamb. So I like the more here on 75.5. I know he's coming off of a pretty rough week. It felt like all those catches came early in that game. Like he was off to a great start and then just disappeared for the next 3 quarters. But I don't think we see that again.
Yeah, I think a big part of that too last week was that once Dallas realized that they can just run the ball at will on Houston, it started to work. Both Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott had over 75 yards in that one.
Yep.
So moving on, Trevor Lawrence on the other side, taking on the Cowboys at home, 240.5 passing yards is the more or less for Lawrence. He erupted for 368 last week. That's a career high against Tennessee. And he's thrown for more than 251 in more than 241, in 7 of 13 games this season. But Dallas has the number 2 passing defense in the NFL, allowing just 182 yards per game. And they haven't allowed a quarterback to throw for 241 yards against them since Matthew Stafford back in week 5. And that's actually the only quarterback this season to reach that number. Can Trevor Lawrence do it, though?
That's a good stat. I like the less here. It's based on the numbers. It's certainly the safer play. However, if you think Dallas is going to be leading this game, and if you think, like I do, that Jacksonville's not going to be able to run the ball for like the 5th week in a row. I mean, if you look at ETN's numbers for the last month, it's been pretty ugly. And I don't think that changes against Dallas. So I don't view this as a great spot for Lawrence or the Jags passing game. So to me, it comes down to volume. Like if they can't get the rushing game going, if you're trailing by 7 to 10 points for most of the second half, does that mean Lawrence is just slinging it around? Probably. So there is a good case for the more here, but I got to go less. I think Lawrence goes just under.
All right. Very good. Moving on, Isaiah Pacheco, 70.5 rushing yards is his more or less. He's reached 71 twice this season, but Houston has the worst running defense in the National Football League, giving up 165 yards per game on the ground. As I mentioned just before this, both Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott over 75 plus yards and a touchdown. So for those of you like me that picked up Jerick McKinnon this week, I think you can roll out both Kansas City running backs and expect them to each have good days.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, McKinnon, obviously the pass catcher, had a couple big plays, 2 touchdowns last week. He's been on and off very productive for fantasy. I like Pacheco more. I think he's, the more traditional back. I think going up against this Houston defense, kind of an ideal matchup, especially in a game where Kansas City could be looking to run clock in the second half. So I think this is a pretty friendly number, considering Pacheco has been right around 70 yards the last few weeks, and this is the best of those matchups, so I'll go more.
All right. And who covers in this one? It's Kansas City giving 14 points right now.
I like KC in my article over at Rotowire. The numbers indicate that's not the right pick. I'll tell you that. Teams in this situation, being 14-point favorites on the road, they cover at well below a 50% clip. I think they're like 2-7-1 ATS over the last 10 times. Talking 14-point road favorites, but I think this is a unique situation, like we said, given both teams kind of coming off of very different games last week. Kansas City having the ability to essentially name their score in this game. And I just trust that Kansas City could even play like a B- game on offense and still do enough to win this game by at least 15. So I went KC.
Yeah, I took KC as well. I mean, but I also took Dallas last week, minus 16.5. And
so did I.
That bit me. Last week was rough. Last week was very, very rough.
Moving on. That was my worst week of the year, ATS.
Same here. Jalen Hurts, the Eagles at the Bears, 230.5 passing yards is his more or less. He's thrown for 231 in 7 of 13 games this season. Chicago, though, does rank 11th against the pass, allowing just 204 yards per game. I guess kind of concern here with this one is, does this game get out of hand too?
Yeah, I mean, you got to read into that stat for Chicago. That's just like teams aren't throwing the ball on them because they're up and they could just run the ball. So, I don't think that means that Chicago has a good secondary by any means. This is a defense that has either traded away or lost like a ton of key parts due to injury. It feels like a defense that takes like another step back every week. They won't have Eddie Jackson the rest of the year. That's huge. So to me, it just comes down to like, do the Eagles need Jalen Hurts to throw the ball enough to get to 231? And I don't think they do. I think they'll be able to run the ball. I think this could look a lot like the Green Bay game a few weeks ago where they piled up 500 yards of offense, but a huge chunk of that came on the ground. I don't really see this as a letdown spot for Philly. I know a lot of people do. I like them to continue rolling. I mean, they've given us really no indication that they're the type of team that gets tripped up in these situations. I think last week, a lot of people were on the Giants to win that game at home. That was over by the end of the first quarter. I mean, Philly's just been rolling over teams, and Justin Fields worries me a little bit. Obviously, when you're playing that guy and he's capable of ripping off a touchdown run from anywhere on the field, that does scare you. But defensively, I don't see what the case is that the Bears can slow down Philly at all.
Well, they do have Jack Sanborn, who's been an IDP monster since stepping in for Roquan Smith. I mean,
yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. You can bring up Justin Fields. Let's talk about him here, and we'll close out the 1:00 games. Fields is rushing prop, 70.5 rushing yards. He's reached this in 6 of 12, including in 4 straight. Eagles run defense kind of middle of the pack. Can Fields get it going on the ground?
I don't know that he can. This is a high number. Even before the bye, he had a nice rushing day against Green Bay, but the vast majority of his yards came on one 55-yard run where he was basically untouched early in the game, and they were really conservative with him. I mean, the designed runs weren't really there for Fields dealing with the shoulder injury. So to me, it depends how much that shoulder is healed over the bye week. If he's still dealing with some discomfort there and they don't want to run him 15 times between the tackles on these designed keepers, then I don't think he gets there. And I think I got to err on the side of caution here and go less, because Chicago doesn't really have anything to play for. I know Justin Fields is the type of guy who's going to put his body on the line regardless, but I think they'll try to be a little bit more careful with him, especially against this defense.
All right, very good. Let's move on to the 4:00 slate. We got 2 great games in this window, one that could be interesting and then one that probably shouldn't be shown on television, in the Broncos and Cardinals. But anyways, we'll start off with Justin Herbert against the Titans. 290.5 passing yards is his more or less. He's coming off a season-high 367 against the Dolphins last week on Sunday Night Football. He's thrown for 291 in 6 of 13 games. Tennessee ranks 31st against the pass, allowing over 280 yards per game. They just gave up 348 to Trevor Lawrence and 380 to Jalen Hurts before that. And I also kind of sneaky like the Titans in this one to cover too. But I do think Justin Herbert's going to have a big day. I would hit them more on this one.
Oh, same here. Same here. I think this is, if we had to like lock up a pick of the week, this might be my favorite line. I think, like I said earlier, I think we get a back and forth game. Like you said, Tennessee's going to be able to score. I think the Chargers are going to be able to really move the ball through the air. I mean, this is a totally different team when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are healthy. We've seen that the last couple of weeks. Obviously, Austin Eckler, the majority of his yards every week seem to come through the air as well. So, yeah, I haven't really decided spread-wise. I think I sided with the Chargers. I think we had it at 2.5. It's going to be a close game, but I'm starting to kind of lose faith in Tennessee. I mean, early in the season, they were this team that you would say like, man, they could play anybody close. They had that Chiefs game that they took to overtime with Malik Willis. And I don't know, man. I mean, they get blown out by the Jags. I thought they'd keep it close against Philly 2 weeks ago. That game was over really early. So they kind of need to prove that they can hang with quality opponents. Like all their wins this season have come against bad teams.
I'm going to take the Titans here. They're coming in 3 straight losses heading into this one. And like I talked about at the beginning of the show, I just don't trust the Chargers when everything is just laid out in front of them like it is right now. They'll screw it up at some point. Yeah. So I'm taking the points with Tennessee. Give me the 3 points. Moving on, Joe Burrow, Bengals at the Bucks, 272.5 passing yards for Joey B. Thrown for 273 in 7 of 13 games this season. Tampa does rank 6th against the pass. They've only allowed one quarterback to throw for more than 270 yards on them, and that was Geno Smith in Germany.
Yeah, and different rules apply overseas, so that makes sense. I'm going to go less here because we don't really know what's going on with Higgins and Boyd. Both were limited on Thursday. I think if they don't play, or even if one of them doesn't play, especially Higgins, this could look a lot like last week where I like Cincinnati to win this game. I like them to be in control, but they're just not going to be the same type of offense when you take away those kind of playmakers. And you can even throw Hayden Hurst in that bucket as well. He's been a great addition for them at tight end. So I think we see kind of a more conservative, get in, get out with a win type of game plan from Cincinnati. I don't know that this is necessarily a spot where Burrow's throwing the ball all over the place. So I like Cincinnati to win. I like him to cover, but I like the less on 272.5.
Yeah, I was reading about that that Boyd injury, and that just sounds nasty, the finger injury that he's got going on. So I don't know how he's going to be able to catch the football if he is out there. Let's head back to that Titans-Chargers game. Derrick Henry, 95.5 rushing yards is his more or less. 121 last week, but he did most of that damage in the first half. He kind of had the second half off in that one. 96 or more in 6 of 13 games this season, but just once in his last 5. Chargers run D, not quite as bad as it was last year, but it's still pretty bad. They're ranked 28th in the NFL, allowing 147. You said Herbert was your favorite play of the week. I think this one is mine. Give me the more on Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I might have to switch to this one. Henry went over this by like 30 yards in the first half last week against Jacksonville. Completely flipped the script in the second half, but it looked like he was on pace for like a 300-yard day for a while. This is an easy more. Easy more.
All right, let's just move on. Jamar Chase at Tampa Bay, 85.5 receiving yards for Chase. He's hit 86 or more in 5 of 9 games, including each of the last 4. Nick, you were kind of talking about how he might be the only option for Joe Burrow. Yep. Does he hit this number?
I think he does by default. Yeah, I think as of right now, you have to kind of prepare as if Higgins and Boyd aren't playing, and I think that means it's a Jamar Chase show. Again, it wasn't like a massive day for him last week, and again, I could see it playing out very similarly against a Tampa Bay team that, to me, kind of they're similar to the Browns in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a reason those teams played into overtime a couple of weeks ago. So I think we could see a very similar script here for Cincinnati.
All right, moving on. You got Tom Brady on the other side. Bucks, Bengals, 270.5 passing yards for TB12. He's hit the more on this number in 7 of 13 games, 109 passing attempts in the past 2 weeks, 152 in the past 3 weeks. As the Bucks finally realize that they cannot run the football this year. Do you pretty much have to press the more with Brady at this point because they just can't run the ball and the volume is just so absurd?
Yeah, you do. I mean, it's the same thing every single week with Brady. They try to run the ball early. They get stuffed every time. And then Brady, like, I hesitate to even call it an air raid offense because the ball's only going like 3 feet on every pass, but it's just like a short pass raid offense. And that's all the Bucks have. It really is. I mean, every drive they face like a 3rd and 6, and they rely on Cade Otton to make a catch on the sideline, or Chris Godwin to just make a crazy catch on a slant and then just get smacked, and hopefully he holds on. Occasionally they'll mix in a Mike Evans Hail Mary ball that usually is overthrown or goes out of bounds.
Or drop.
It's really ugly to watch, man. It's awful. And like, I think a lot of people saw the game last week. Everybody's like, what? Is Tom Brady bad? It's like, have you been watching, man? Like, this is what they do against everybody. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. This is what the offense has looked like every single week. So yeah, it's bizarre because like Brady's actually had an okay fantasy season just because of the volume. Like, he's way up there. And if you look at all the total stats, but the efficiency, the yards per attempt, the touchdowns haven't been there. Had a couple picks last week, and threw interceptions against the Saints. So I don't think Brady's washed or anything, but this offense is just broken.
Yeah. I think you got to hit them more though, because he's averaging over 50
You do.
attempts a game,
Yeah.
or else you're gonna be sweating a lot watching Tampa Bay football if you don't hit them more on Brady here. Josh Jacobs against the Patriots. It's the last one we'll do. 90.5 rushing yards. Jacobs has been a man on a mission this season. All that disrespect in the offseason about people saying, don't draft this guy in your fantasy drafts. He's the NFL's leading rusher right now. He has more than 90 yards in 7 of 13 games, including in 4 straight. The Pats, though, they rank 12th against the run at 111 yards per game. Patriots haven't allowed anyone over 90 yards since Aaron Jones way back in week 4, but James Conner did just have 85 on Monday Night Football.
This is so tough. I think Jacobs probably goes over here. I mean,
can I give you my thinking as a Patriots fan on this one? So the Patriots have already tweeted out Belichick. It's called the Bellistrator, where he like goes through like an opponent's big, their big player and all that kind of stuff. And he focused on Josh Jacobs this week and how amazing he's been. So if I had to pick between the two of Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams, so who's going to have the bigger day on Sunday, I'd go Devontae in this one because I think Adams is also playing on another level. The Pats corners, when they go up against those elite wide receivers, sometimes it gets ugly pretty quickly. And I think Josh McDaniels also is going to want to throw the ball in this Patriots defense. So I would take the less on Jacobs. I think he'll score in this one, but I don't think he'll hit 90 yards.
I think that's fair. Yeah, and he's also banged up. I mean, he's still dealing with the calf. He's dealing with a hand injury too. So, you always in those situations, like when you're talking prop bets, like sometimes if you're right on the edge and you feel like it's a 50-50, I kind of like to lean less just to account for the possibility of Jacobs maybe not finishing this game.
Mm-hmm. Or taking a couple series off anyway
in
the middle of it.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Let's move on to Sunday Night Football. Pats Raiders were flexed out in favor of Giants Commanders. This apparently is the game that everybody wanted. It's the rematch of that 20-20 tie from a couple weeks ago. The Commanders are favored by 4.5 in this one, Nick. Let's just do this. Let's give our game pick, and then who do you like to have the bigger day, Daniel Jones or Taylor Heinicke?
So I like the Commanders to win this game. I think I took the Giants to cover 4.5. I don't think there's all that much separating these two teams. Obviously, they played to a tie 2 weeks ago, but this game is in Washington. Washington's coming off the bye. The Giants are coming off of an embarrassment against the Eagles. They come out of that game even more injured. You worry about Saquon's health in this game. So I do think Washington wins. I don't think they run away with it, though. I think both of these teams have ways of kind of making games uglier and more difficult than they need to be. I'll side with Heinicke. I will. I know Daniel Jones has been the better fantasy quarterback this year. He's like sneakily kind of up there on a lot of fantasy leaderboards thanks to the rushing yards. But I think this is a good spot for Washington. It's about as good of a spot as they'll have the rest of the way coming off the bye. And I just love the weapons that Heinicke has significantly more than Jones.
Yeah, give me the Commanders in this one. I like them to cover as well. Giants are in a bit of a free fall. 1-4-1 in their last 6 games. That one win was against the Houston Texans. They just got smacked around by the Eagles last week. Commanders, meanwhile, as you mentioned, they're heating up. They're 6-1-1 in their last 8 games since switching to Taylor Heinicke. And we know how amazing he's been against the spread, too, in his career. So I like Washington to cover, coming in off their bye. So, yeah, give me the Commanders. I like them by a touchdown, 23-16 with the final, and give me Heinicke with the more, too.
All right. There we go. There we go. Huge game for the Green Bay Packers. If both teams could somehow take a loss, that'd be ideal.
All right. Very good. Yeah, Monday Night Football preview will be up to on Monday morning here on MKF, so make sure you check that out. Thanks for watching, guys. Good luck on your contest this week. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page at Monkey Knife Fight, and good luck.